Why the most dangerous book on power has never been written. The rich always hide it. Power isn't in books real. Power was never in books, and anyone who still believes that reading enough will eventually bring them into contact with it is still motionless, still standing in the position of the guided, the managed, the air-led. If power could be learned by turning pages, taking notes, underlining and quoting, this world would not display hierarchy so cleanly that you can identify who sits above simply by watching who others fall silent for. But reality does not operate that way. The most widely read person is rarely the one who decides, and the decider rarely needs to prove what they understand. Society sustains a remarkably efficient illusion that knowledge is a fair road to position. Study more and authority will be granted. Understand deeper and you will be valued. It's a beautiful story, easy to teach, easy to maintain, useful for keeping order. It convinces people that power is a reward for mental diligence rather than a consequence of collision calculation and placement. Once you accept that story, you voluntarily remain in an endless preparation phase, while power in the real world never waits for anyone to be ready before it moves. If power could be transmitted honestly, the people who hold it would be the first to block it, not because they fear others becoming smarter, but because they fear others seeing correctly. Intelligence is harmless, clarity is dangerous. Clarity is recognizing who decides and who merely reacts. Clarity is seeing whose interests the rules protect, and when those rules are bent to remove someone. Those things cannot be taught publicly, because once they are stared at directly, they destroy the shared narrative that order needs in order to survive. Books are rarely banned because books rarely threaten. The danger isn't in the content. It's in the context books will never allow you to stand inside. People are permitted to read, but they are not permitted to occupy the position where what they read can become consequence. That is how power protects itself, not through crude censorship, but through unlimited permission. When everything is allowed to be said, very little remains sharp enough to cut. Power isn't on paper because paper flattens everything. There everyone is allowed to understand, but no one is allowed to use. And when you confuse understanding with use, you become harmless without realizing it, not because you are wrong, but because you are standing in the wrong place. What is hidden was never knowledge. What is hidden is always position. And as long as you believe reading will carry you there, you remain outside the game. Breaking the social faith. Knowledge that is permitted to circulate has never been the knowledge that generates power. Society is not stingy with books, courses, or credentials because those things are safe. They are designed to be widely accessible without disturbing the structure. People praise learning, glorify understanding, encourage deeper thinking, yet everything distributed at scale has been sanded down until it can no longer threaten anything. The danger is not in knowing a lot. The danger is in knowing the right thing. The social story stays consistent. If you understand the rules, you will be allowed to play fairly. If you master the process, you will be valued. But that story is built for the many, so they keep believing the system rewards competence rather than position. In practice, what is taught only helps you operate smoothly inside an existing frame. It does not help you step outside it. It trains efficient executors. It does not train deciders. Public instruction always stops at the surface. You are taught the law, but not who is permitted to break it. You are taught procedure, but never told who can bypass it without paying a price. You are taught what is right, but no one tells you that there are moments when being right is the fastest way to be removed. This kind of knowledge produces educated obedience, not power. The system does not fear intelligent people because intelligence can be measured, ranked, and controlled through scores and credentials. What it fears is people who understand how power actually moves, who see that every structure has gaps, every rule has exceptions, and those exceptions are not distributed equally. It fears people who recognize that the official explanation is only the version necessary for the majority to accept, not the version sufficient for action. That is why permitted knowledge always comes with an invisible ceiling. You are allowed to know a great deal, but not the deciding thing. You are permitted to analyze, but not to alter outcomes. You are allowed to debate inside a pre-drawn frame, to object within pre-approved boundaries, and to call it independent thought. Once you believe what you've been taught is the whole truth, you become easier to manage than ever. Knowledge that creates power is never located where the crowd is thickest. It lives in the spaces between what is said in the details everyone skims past in the silences no one explains. And that space is not for the majority, because if the majority could see it, it would no longer be a space at all. Human nature. The forbidden book has never existed as a concrete object. No cover, no title, no author for people to hunt down. If it were a real book, it would have been copied, quoted, interpreted, and diluted long ago. Power is not naive enough to hide itself in a form that can be replicated so easily. What is concealed is not on the page. It lives in the gaps that books are forced to leave untouched in order to be allowed to exist at all. Human nature does not operate on ideals. It operates on interest and fear. People can speak endlessly about justice, morality, shared values, but their actions orbit two silent questions. What does this give me, and what do I lose if I don't do it? Power understands this perfectly, which is why it does not rely on truth to persuade. It only needs to arrange incentives and fears in the correct places. The rest will be rationalized by the individual without resistance. Envy is never loud. It lives in quiet comparison, in the discomfort of watching someone move faster without obeying the same rules one has obeyed. That comparison makes people willing to tolerate privilege above them as long as they believe that one day they too might reach that level by following the proper path. This belief stabilizes the order because it converts injustice into deferred hope. Books do not state this openly because stating it would mean admitting that the majority are playing a game they cannot win. Instead, books speak of personal effort, self-improvement, and understanding the system well enough to integrate smoothly into it. None of this is false, but it stops just short of the dangerous line. It teaches adaptation, not interrogation. It helps people function within rules, not ask who designed those rules and why they exist. The forbidden book, in truth, is a collection of recognitions that only appear when someone stands close enough to the operational core to see the misalignment between language and behavior. There one realizes that people do not act according to what is right, but according to what is advantageous within a specific context. One sees that celebrated standards are enforced only when they do not obstruct the interests of those with power, and one learns that grasping this too early before holding position does not make one stronger. It only throws one out of sync with everyone else. What is hidden then is not esoteric knowledge, but the raw truth of how people actually behave when they are not being watched. That truth does not need to be banned because most people are not in a position to use it. And the few who are understand that silence is far safer than voicing what no one truly wants to hear. Dark personality. Dark is not synonymous with evil, and that confusion is precisely what allows many people to comfort themselves into remaining weak. Evil is a moral category. It requires judgment from the crowd. Dark does not. Dark is a psychological state in which a person does not need to be loved in order to act, does not need to be understood in order to decide, and does not need forgiveness in order to move forward. Dark is when emotion is no longer the control center, but merely a secondary signal. Society teaches people to seek acceptance before seeking influence. It teaches them to speak in ways that cause no discomfort, to act in ways that avoid judgment, and to adjust themselves to fit shared expectations. That process produces individuals who are highly predictable. And what is predictable is always easy to steer. Dark personality emerges when a person no longer uses other people's reactions as the metric for their own decisions. Dark people are not cold because they want to appear dangerous. They are cold because they understand that emotion is easier to exploit than reason. A person who needs to be loved can be threatened with the withdrawal of approval. A person who needs praise can be manipulated through expectations. A person who needs to be understood will explain too much. Dark personality severs these needs, and it is precisely this severance that makes such a person difficult to control. Dark does not mean the absence of emotion. Dark means refusing to let emotion govern one's position. A dark individual still feels fear, still hesitates, still recognizes risk, but they do not allow those states to surface as easily readable behavior. They do not react immediately. They do not explain immediately. They do not need to prove that they are good. In a world where most people act in order to be seen, not needing to be seen becomes a significant advantage. This is why dark personalities are so often misunderstood. They are labeled cold, calculating, insincere, even dangerous. But the discomfort they provoke does not come from wrongdoing, it comes from unreadability. What people fear most is not a clearly evil figure, but someone who offers no emotional cues by which the next move can be predicted. Dark is not a path for the majority because it requires the ability to endure being unloved. When you no longer need to be loved, you are no longer easily compelled to please. And when you stop trying to please, you begin to see the mechanics of power far more clearly than those who are still busy maintaining their image. The mechanics of real-world power. Real-world power does not operate the way books describe it, and that is why so many people who do everything right still remain below. Books teach procedures, principles, rational order. But power does not live in those stable structures. It lives in the moment of decision where some people are allowed to say, "We don't need to follow the procedure this time," and others are never permitted to utter that sentence. At work, power does not belong to the person who understands the system best, but to the person who decides when the system applies. The one who memorizes the rules always asks for permission. The one with power announces that the decision has already been made. A person who follows procedures perfectly becomes easy to replace because they only function when instructions exist. A person who knows when procedures can be bypassed becomes hard to touch because they are directly tied to outcomes. Systems are not controlled by those who obey them, but by those who know how to bend them without breaking them. In money, the mechanism of power is even more exposed. Books teach risk management, profit analysis, cash flow balance. Power operates elsewhere in who transfers risk onto others and who bears the consequences when things collapse. The person without power asks, "Is this legal?" The person with power asks, "If this goes wrong, who takes the hit?" The questions sound similar, but they exist on entirely different levels. The distance between them is the distance of power. In relationships, power does not belong to the most sincere person, but to the one who needs less. The more you need, the more you explain. The more you explain, the weaker your position becomes. Power lies in the ability to withdraw presence without asking permission, in not needing to prove you are right, and in forcing others to adjust their behavior to keep you around. This is not written in books because it is not pretty, not comfortable, and it shatters the illusion that relationships are governed purely by goodwill. There are people who never read books and still win, not because they despise knowledge, but because they learn directly from friction. They observe who is protected when mistakes happen, who is pushed aside when outcomes turn bad, and who consistently receives more authority after every crisis. Meanwhile, there are people who read endlessly and still remain below because they believe understanding the rules is enough. They fail to see that rules are only the surface. Power lies in the right to decide whether the rules apply at all. Real-world power does not reward those who understand the game. It rewards those who can shape the game in the moment when others are still searching for the rules. That moment is never recorded, never taught, never legitimized. It exists only for those close enough to the center to know that some decisions do not require explanation, because the absence of explanation is itself the clearest signal of power. Why good people lose. Those who believe that reading is enough are not stupid, and that is precisely why they lose so consistently. They are intelligent, disciplined, analytically capable, and they understand exactly what should be done in an ideal system. The problem is that power does not operate inside that ideal system. It operates in reality where the person who decides does not need to prove they are right, only to make the outcome happen. Good people tend to wait for valid signals, they wait for invitations, they wait for confirmation, they wait their turn. They believe that respecting order is how recognition is earned. But power is not distributed by order. It accumulates in those who step forward before permission is given, then force the system to adjust to actions already taken. Good people see risk first. People with power see the opportunity hidden inside that risk. Good people believe fairness will balance itself if everyone does the right thing, so they invest heavily in being correct. Not crossing lines, not causing discomfort, not creating conflict. But that very cleanliness makes them replaceable. When nothing sticks to them, nothing binds the system to keeping them. Power is not attached to correctness. It is attached to how dependent the system becomes on your presence. They also tend to ask for permission too often. Asking for permission is an admission that decision-making authority does not belong to you. Someone accustomed to asking finds it unbearable to simply take, not because they fear being wrong, but because they fear losing the image of being good that they have built. Yet that image only has value in the eyes of others who also lack power. To those above, it creates no obligation. Good people usually need validation. Their knowledge exists in their minds, not in their influence. They know they are right, but still need others to agree. And the moment you need agreement, you have already placed yourself lower. Power does not need validation. It creates standards and then forces others to adjust to keep up. So good people do not lose because they are wrong. They lose because they are playing a different game. A game where the reward is moral reassurance, not decision-making authority. While they continue to do the right thing, continue to wait, continue to believe they are not yet enough. The positions are quietly filled by those who do not need to be called good, only cold enough to take power when it appears. The Machiavellian frame. Machiavelli never wrote in order to turn the weak into the strong, and that is precisely why he has been hated more than almost anyone who speaks about power. He makes no promises of escape. He does not give the reader the comforting sense that understanding correctly is enough to rise. He does something far more ruthless. He strips away the beautiful stories that those without power tell themselves in order to endure their position. Machiavelli does not stand on the side of morality, nor on the side of comfort. He stands on the side of reality where power operates, regardless of the wishes of those who do not hold it. The Machiavellian frame begins with a premise that is simple, but hard to swallow. Power is not a contest over who is more right, but a game of who can remain longer in the position of decision. The weak want power to operate according to their standards because that is the only way they can feel safe. Machiavelli does the opposite. He forces the reader to accept that standards are always written by those at the top and adjusted whenever necessary to protect that position. He does not teach people to become monsters. He teaches them to stop being naive. Naivety is believing that goodwill will be repaid with goodwill. Naivety is believing that correct action will automatically be rewarded. Naivety is believing that power needs your belief in order to exist. Machiavelli shows that power responds only to pressure to interest and to the ability to produce consequences, not to the purity of intention. What unsettles readers is not the advice itself, but the truth beneath it, that the strong do not need to be loved in order to rule, that fear is more stable than affection, that people submit more easily when they believe the choice is theirs, even when the outcome has already been arranged. These truths contradict every comforting story society relies on to keep the majority compliant. That is why Machiavelli is labeled cold, cruel, dangerous. The Machiavellian frame does not ask you to do evil. It asks you to abandon the need to be seen as good when you enter the realm of power. As long as you need to be recognized as righteous, you will limit your actions to protect that image. And image is the easiest thing to manipulate. Power does not care what you think of yourself. It only cares what you can do when there is no applause. Those who read Machiavelli and feel resistance are usually people who want the outcomes of power, but cannot endure the price that comes with it. That price is not guilt. It is isolation, suspicious glances, and no longer standing in line with the crowd's familiar beliefs. Machiavelli does not pull anyone out of that position. He simply places a mirror in front of the reader and leaves them to decide whether they want to continue being loved or continue moving forward. The inverse warning. Not everyone who understands power should move closer to it, and this is a truth rarely spoken, because it ruins the familiar story that knowledge always leads to freedom. In reality, there are insights that, if encountered too early, do not open doors, but cut off the way back. Once you see the real mechanisms at work, you can no longer pretend to believe in the elegant explanations you once accepted. And society has no obligation to adjust itself so that you feel comfortable with that loss. Dark personality does not support anyone. It offers no sense of safety, no certainty, and certainly no guarantee of victory. It only removes illusion. When illusion disappears, what remains is a cold emptiness, where you are forced to take full responsibility for how you see the world. Many people collapse not because they lack intelligence, but because they cannot endure standing in the crowd while no longer sharing the same common story. Understanding power means you begin to see the price attached to every action. There are no longer innocent gestures, no harmless words. Every move is tied to interest position and some form of calculation, however subtly disguised. This does not make you strong overnight. It only makes you harder to integrate. And prolonged difficulty in fitting in almost always leads to isolation, whether you want it or not. Partial application is the fastest way to destroy yourself. A person who sees power but still needs to be loved, still needs recognition, still needs to stand on the right side will live in constant contradiction. They act out of sync, say things no one wants to hear, and then are surprised when they are pushed out. Dark knowledge does not forgive hesitation. It is not for those who want to understand the real mechanism while preserving social comfort. Not everyone can endure being looked at with suspicion. Not everyone can accept being labeled cold simply because they do not react as expected. Power demands the ability to stand firm in that gray zone where there is no applause, no validation, and no one who will step forward to protect you if you fall. Those who approach it out of curiosity are usually the first to retreat. So this is neither an invitation nor advice. It is only an inverse warning. Some doors open not so that you may walk through them, but so that you understand why you should not. Power does not need more people who understand it. It needs only those strong enough to endure the consequences of no longer being allowed to remain naive. Repositioning the reader. The problem is not that you have not read the right books. The problem is that you are standing in a position where truth has no effect. Not because the truth is wrong, but because you lack the authority to turn it into consequence. Society does not block your access to knowledge. It places you on a tier where knowledge stops at awareness and never reaches decision. And when truth does not lead to change, it becomes a burden, not a weapon. There are people who know a great deal and are never listened to, not because they speak incorrectly, but because no one needs to adjust their behavior in response to what they say. Power does not respond to argument. It responds to threat. Until you represent a threat, every accurate analysis you produce is harmless. You may see more clearly than others, but clarity does not grant you access to the steering wheel. This is where many become confused. They believe that if their understanding goes deep enough, the world will eventually open a path. But the world does not operate on logical persuasion. It operates on the redistribution of decision-making authority. When you do not possess that authority, all your understanding remains private. It applies pressure to no one, and without pressure, nothing moves. Society allows you to speak the truth as long as you speak it from a position that is not dangerous. You may analyze, critique, expose distortions, yet outcomes are still decided elsewhere. This is not personal injustice. It is mechanism. There are layers of truth that are permitted to exist only at corresponding layers of position. Bringing the truth of an upper tier down to a lower one does not empower you. It only throws you out of sync. Once you begin to see this, you experience a quiet but persistent dissonance. You react differently. You stay silent where others speak. You say things no one wants to hear. Gradually, you notice that you are no longer invited into familiar circles of influence. Not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer playing the role your position requires. This section offers no choice and no escape. It only repositions. Truth does not rescue you from the structure you are standing in. It merely makes the wall in front of you visible. And when that wall becomes clear enough, the next step is not more reading, but accepting that some doors do not open simply because you understand how they work. A cold ending. Real power does not need to be written down because it is already fully lived by those who possess it. They leave no manuals behind, do not package experience into theory, and feel no obligation to explain how they make decisions. Their power does not come from knowledge that can be transmitted, but from a position that allows personal choices to become shared reality. When you are inside power, you do not need to speak about it. Others adjust themselves automatically to your presence. Books always lag behind reality. The moment something becomes safe enough to be written, it has already ceased to be a decisive advantage. It turns into knowledge, then into history, then into something to be discussed. Power does not stand still long enough to be recorded. It changes shape, tone, and strategy. It exists in decisions that never reach the minutes, in agreements that require no signatures, in silences everyone understands, but no one names. There, those who have power do not need to explain, and those who need to explain no longer have power. Those who possess power do not leave an intellectual legacy for the masses. They leave an order. That order keeps most people busy explaining, legitimizing, and defending a system they do not control. When you go searching for the hidden book, what you actually touch is not content, but a boundary, the boundary between those permitted to understand in order to act and those permitted to understand only in order to accept. There is no redemptive conclusion here, no promise of liberation. Only a bare truth. Power does not need you to believe in it. It only needs you to remain in the correct position so that you never touch it. And most will live their entire lives in that position, reading about power, discussing power, judging power without ever forcing it to respond. What remains is silence, the silence of what is never written, the silence of those who understand that some truths do not need to be spoken because speaking them would not change who holds power. When the final illusion falls away, what remains is not an answer, but a cold emptiness where there is nothing left to believe in except the position in which you stand. If power has never been hidden from you, only kept out of your reach, then what position are you actually standing in right now?